If you think about it, comedy is power.
Yeah.
On an individual level, when you make people laugh, you make people listen. We actually kind of chip away at like who's in power.
Yeah.
And it sounds grandiose. And we can't do all of it, but that's our angle.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Take a Pause with Mare, where we celebrate the pause in all of her glory and sometimes not so glory. So grab some coffee and get ready for a conversation that's honest, real, and maybe hopefully a little funny. Today's episode is all about humor, female empowerment, and self discovery, which I'm also going through. So we'll explore how laughter can empower women during major life transitions like menopause and choosing yourself when sometimes you didn't have to or really want to earlier in your life. So I'm honored actually today to have Lynn Harris in the studio. And she is CEO and founder of Gold Comedy. She's a journalist, author, stand up comic. Her list of accomplishments is truly impressive, and I'm thrilled to have her join us. So, hi, Lynn. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much. Happy to be here.
I'm so happy you're here. So to start, can you tell us about your journey and, how you came to where you are now?
Sure. And first of all, thank you again for having me. Let's see. One winter day in 1969. Well, I'll work a little bit backwards. I'll go backwards chronologically. So as you mentioned, I'm founder and CEO of a company called Gold Comedy. And we are the comedy school and professional network and content studio where women and non-binary creators and others come to build their comedy careers and creative side hustles, which I think is a thing that's relevant to your listeners, even if they don't consider themselves like comedians. And they join a powerful community and they make funny stuff that gets seen on all kinds of stages and screens. And what motivated me is kind of a culmination of all this stuff that I did and cared about all my life. In terms of what the company aims to do, we want to help individuals who have, who for whatever reason, and some of them are obvious, don't see themselves in what not entirely, but still significantly remains a very dude-dominated world.
Yeah.
And that is comedy. I mean, what doesn't really? But we want to help them succeed. If that's what they want to do, we want to make it easier for them. Comedy is hard for everyone. We want to make it easier for the people for whom it's the hardest. And then what happens in the aggregate, though, when we do that is, if you think about it, comedy is power.
Yeah.
On an individual level, when you make people laugh, you make people listen.
Mm-hmm.
At the cultural and sort of societal level, comedy is a cultural force. So it helps us process the news. It exposes us to new voices. It challenges norms. And so who makes comedy matters. So in the aggregate, what we're looking to do is by shifting our idea of who gets to make comedy and in actuality, who gets to make comedy, we actually kind of chip away at like who's in power. Yeah. And it sounds grandiose, and we can't do all of it, but that's our angle. And the reason how that became my angle is, as I said, sort of a culmination of all these things that kind of came together that I have cared about and worked on for many decades that include, but are not limited to, doing stand-up, caring about social justice, being especially in the realm of gender, but not only, and being a journalist and having worked hard enough and then been, lucky enough that I was able to build a real career and kind of personal brand around, well, what if I could do all those things at the same time? How can I blend serious journalism, advocacy, and where appropriate, humor or humorous approaches or humor-driven campaigns or whatever they might be to bring people in and change hearts, minds, and actions in ways that are possible through other means, of course, and everyone has to do their own things, but like that's my special sauce. I worked at an organization, a very cool human rights organization that was well known for using pop culture and humor driven tools to get people to think about and act on human rights issues, to make those issues real and relevant and actionable to them, not just like writing angry letters to a faraway country, but like right here in the United States. So like we got to have animations at NASCAR races and stuff like that, where you really are able to kind of, you get to meet audiences where they are,
right,
with languages they understand, and actually make people go, and so that's the short version, because I'm old, but so it's been the big sort of juicy combo of jokes and changing the world.
Yeah, and that's amazing how you said about like, going like to a NASCAR, and like I feel like people feel they're comfortable in their environment. The joke lands better, because you're not like holding yourself, like you're not like, oh my God, but when people are in an uncomfortable situation, trying to be joking or funny or just try to bring something else in, they're not as receptive. So I feel that, like you said, putting it into where they're comfortable and bringing it to where it's going to land the best, I think.
Yeah, it's what the message is. So like relatable kind of gritty animation. It's where they are. They're already at a NASCAR race or Lambeau Field or something like that. And then the messages we had were like serious but funny. Where we were basically encouraging men to not stand idly by when other dudes were being dicks. So like, and so like there was a little bit of like shamey scoldy, but it wasn't coming from us. It was encouraging, and we did it in a funny way that wasn't too dark or too mean at all, but like that depicted like a guy being a jerk to his girlfriend, whatever. And then literally all the other guys in the entire racetrack turning around and being like, and we did it in a light way, a funny way. And that guy was like, so, and it wasn't mean to that guy. They didn't beat him up,
Right.
And it wasn't like even scoldy. It was more like the majority of people saying, bro, that's not how we do.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea we were putting out there, and kind of like, and there were also jokes in the animation and stuff like that. And the idea that we were putting out there is not like that one guy is a bad guy. The idea we were putting out there is, look what a difference it can make when and actually what happened was, it was one guy who started saying, dude, and then the other ones were like, yeah, and it spread. And so it was the first guy who was like, dude, can we not? And that's what kind of gave the others the courage to be like, dude, can we not? And it wasn't so much about shaming that dude. It was about the power of being the first guy and the second guy and the third guy to change norms and to have the courage to just say a little thing, which was like, dude, can we not? Whatever. What. So anyway, but we did it. It was light. It was funny. It was in a familiar vernacular. And we wound up getting it shown at literally, at outside Lambeau Field, at Notre Dame, Indy 500, all these places. Right. And, anyway, so that's, I went down a rabbit hole, but there are ways to use humor in those, in these settings that really can at least make people go,
Right.
in ways where like a PSA about domestic violence, I'm sorry, but they're going to tune it out.
Yeah. And that's unfortunate, but essentially what you're doing is, it's like a social experiment, because people are like, oh, that's not right. But they're looking to have, somebody else going to say something, and there's there's a pause. You see people and anybody going to say something. And then when they do, and they realize they have the support behind, that's all anybody can hope for. It's like, fine, I'll be the first one to say it, but hopefully others will come behind and support me also.
Yep. This is enacted. I don't want to give people the idea that the New York City subways are dangerous, but I will say that scenario is one that is like has played out on the subway. Like when one person says, I remember one time this I shouldn't go down this rabbit hole either, but one time a guy was like being pretty like threatening to his girlfriend. They weren't necessarily endangering other people, but I took a risk because New York looks after New York.
Yeah.
And I walked toward him with my phone and said, please stop. And I was, videoing him. And then the other people in the subway said, I'm 5'1".
Okay.
This guy was like, and I'm like, please stop. I've got my iPhone, But once I did that, I took the risk that other people were going to kind of like the other dudes around just kind of like sat up for a second. But, and the guy was like, oh no, okay. And like, right. Did we stop him from being an abuser for the rest? No, but just all of those moments can encourage someone else. And that wasn't funny. So this is a bad example, but in any case, it's the what are the lighter ways we can encourage people to think differently even. I mean, that's okay. Here's what I'll say, just to get it back to comedy itself. Those animations were an example of like comedy about a serious thing. But one of the reasons, and like, how do you do that? And how powerful is that? And where is it appropriate to use that? But like the other kind of amazing, powerful thing about comedy and taking us back to it matters who does it. And side note, it matters when like middle-aged women do it, because we are never thought of as funny. We are never encouraged to be funny. We were never encouraged to be funny. And, things are looking up in terms of pop culture in this regard. Because before all we had was Golden Girls and, Lily Tomlin, but when she was young, so it didn't count. Right. So there was nothing between like hilarious Terry Garr and Loretta Swit.
Yeah.
And then there was the Golden Girls. And like, what about, so anyway, but the point is, even if the person who is creating the comedy, whatever form it's in, is not talking about anything serious, even if they're very silly, even if they're just talking about, I don't know, their trip to Italy. It doesn't matter. Like the fact that they are talking on stage or writing or in charge of writing the episode or in charge of running the writer's room or whatever it is just as powerful in its own way. Right. Because if you go to a comedy club, and again, this is not only about stand-up, but as an example, if you go to a comedy club and there's a diverse lineup, which is happening more and more, not enough, more and more, then like you as the audience member are ideally, you spend an hour and a half listening to voices and stories you haven't heard.
Okay.
Even if it's or looking at faces you don't normally listen to, just if you haven't ever met like a trans Muslim comic, maybe they're not even talking about being trans and Muslim.
Right. But
just by showing up and claiming that space, and the rules are they talk and you're quiet other than laughing, that's huge. And so, and I do know women in their 40s and 50s who are either newish at comedy or like still doing it. And that it's really powerful just for them to show up in the first place. Yes. And be like, gentlemen, you'll be listening to me now, Yeah.
And I think that's, the humor aspect of it. Like, that's why I, was interested in starting this podcast. Cause I'm like, I'd rather always be like funny, sarcastic, make fun of myself, or just put myself out there to be like, hey, if this is happening to me, it's probably happening to everybody else also, at some point. And you'd laugh about it, because if you stay in silence and don't tell anybody, it's a very lonely, isolating world, So whether the humor but you do see people sometimes, you poke fun and you're like, oh, wow, menopause, like the brain fog. And they look at you and I hear crickets. I'm like, oh, I hear crickets in that room again. I'm like, girls, join me. I know you're there. But it is women sort of are like, raise the kids, have a family, be nice, be that, good girl type of thing. And nobody really wants to hear your humor. And when you have the voice, then you feel empowered by other women like yourself and other people going out there on the stage, transgender, everything, just being like, hey, I do have something to say. You may laugh, you may not, but just please be polite and listen because it may give you thought a couple of minutes down the road or a month down the road. You'll be like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, that was very
Yeah.
relevant what I just heard.
Right. And I mean, look, everyone has their audience and everyone has someone who is not their audience, right? So like, I don't know, if you drop a few of your favorite menopause jokes in front of XYZ people and they don't laugh, it's fine. They're just not into menopause humor. Like for whatever reason, like they're just like, it's not funny. My head hurts, and that's fine. It doesn't mean that we're not supposed to joke about it. It just means everyone has to find their crowd.
Yeah, exactly. I always say like, find your, tribe or group or so whatever. Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Because there's like in that social experiment with the guy yelling at the girlfriend and other people coming around. Once you find them, then you feel more comfortable and then it just flows better as opposed to, oh, are they, what's happening here,
Yeah.
And I think sometimes like in the workplace, it can either land well or not. And then you're like, ooh.
Yeah. That's a whole thing that's a whole interesting, that's the whole thing. I will say before I want to get into that, but I will say I heard the best quote 2 days ago from Shonda Rhimes of all of the wonderful shows, who said, and she has a new book out, which I recommend, but she said, I'm going to paraphrase this because I don't have it in front of me. But basically she said, hang out with the people who make you feel like you.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I've heard versions of that before, but I was like, that's the one. And the same is true for comedians, the same, it's friends, whatever it is that comedians and their audiences, like, if they're not vibing with you, they're not your people. Like that even goes, I mean, I'm gunning on a high horse now. That's again, a tangent, but like, I even think that about imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
I even think that like, because we made up this thing called imposter syndrome. And then we thought we were really smart because we thought we found a name for this feeling that often women not only have for feeling not adequate. And I've heard other people say, and I believe them, I don't know if you can hear the siren. Sorry if it's loud. With the hospital is right there, which is handy dandy, but also loud for podcasts. I've heard it thought about the other way, and I take this to be my favorite interpretation, which is you're not an imposter. That space wasn't built for you.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean you have to leave it, but like, a woman being in an all male boardroom where no one's paying, where everyone's interrupting her and stealing her ideas. Right. And she feels like, it's so strange. I feel like I haven't earned my way to be here, and silly me. And I feel bad now about having imposter syndrome. And I'm like, Queen, that room was not built for you. You don't have any syndrome. They have a syndrome. They have a syndrome called, we don't like women in the boardroom.
Right.
So I'm like, It's not your fault. Oh my God, you don't have a syndrome.
Well, it is. It's always, and they said there was a study somewhere or somebody did something where women notoriously were the only ones that will say sorry for whatever. You're in a crowd, you hit somebody's arm. Oh, sorry. You hold the door open.
Or they hit you and you say sorry.
Yes. And you're like, sorry. And it's like, yeah, like what? Always, for the most part, women sitting in there would be like, oh, wow, I don't belong here. But are the men saying that they don't belong in there?
No, the men are largely mediocre and are quite sure that they belong there. Like, I don't want to embarrass Heat Pegseth, but come on, he doesn't belong there. I changed his name so you wouldn't know who I was talking about. Or like Vay D. Jance. He's not qualified for that job. He doesn't have imposter syndrome. He's perfectly comfortable.
Right.
So, anyway, but I don't mean to blame women for that. I'm just saying the stuff they tell us to do and the stuff they tell us they think is helpful to fix things and that we absorb is actually the other people should be fixing it.
Right. Because essentially they're just telling us, just follow along, continue on what you're doing, just follow along, listen to us. Please don't have independent thought. Because I think you have independent thought, right?
I mean, right. Total chaos, dogs and cats living together. Yes. But the thing about humor at work is an interesting one that you raised that I wanted to get back to because, and by the way, for your audience, I'm sure that a lot of you folks, work in all sorts of different kinds of audiences, in different kinds of offices where very different kinds of cultures where, some things apply and some things don't. So I think it's important to think most broadly, even though we just started talking about humor at work, about just like, let's talk about how humor can sort of help you at work, depending, but then it's going to be not that different from how humor can, help you in life. So, so just a little sneak peek. But, there's so many studies that talk about, I have no reason to doubt any of them on their face, that talk about really interesting reasons why senses of humor are welcome at work. And I'm not making this up. I just don't have the exact stat in my head. Something like 90% of CEOs prefer to hire managers with a sense of humor. And a very high number of people prefer to be managed with someone with a sense of humor. Now, why is that? There's some interesting reasons. It's not just because that's fun. You don't want to like a sourpuss as your boss. It's just fun. But it also it's a little deeper. It has to do with trust.
Okay.
Because good sense of humor is associated with leadership, because it's an indicator. And by the way, when we're saying good sense of humor, I'm not saying like the wacky one, or or the lampshade on the head of the Christmas party. And by extension, in this whole conversation for your listeners, when I'm talking about bringing comedy and humor into your life, I'm happy to talk with you about a new creative side hustle, a new career pivot. Yes. But I'm also just talking about like bringing humor into your life. And when I'm talking about that, I'm also not talking about, in either case, I'm also not talking about like, okay, now you have to be loud and wacky.
Right.
You might be loud and wacky, but like there's no one way you have to be in order to pursue a new comedy related hustle or to bring more humor into your workplace, your life, whatever. You can be just exactly who you are. It just takes a little more paying attention. And the paying attention part is why people tend to trust leaders and even peers who have good senses of humor or who make them laugh, because in order to make jokes that will make that particular crowd laugh, they have to know you.
Right.
They have to know you. They have to know the space. They have to know the culture. Those stats are not talking about people who are jokey, but their jokes are terrible and inappropriate. That's not that's not having a good sense of humor, right? So they're talking about the people who can read a room, put people at ease, be thoughtful about how they connect with people. Like that's what humor is. It's not the only indicator for that, but that's what they're talking about. But I always thought when I read these studies like that, I was like, that is smart. That rings true. I'm interested. But then I would always like keep reading and I'd be like, but they're not talking about gender. And in these studies, and I would always think, and even though I know I'm not talking about like who's the jokey wacky one, I would always be like, okay, but is it the same for women? Depending on the workplace. Like if like Bruce makes a wisecrack at the beginning of a meeting and it falls flat, Bruce will be fine.
Yeah.
Everyone is going to be like, Bruce. But if Juliet makes a joke at the beginning of a meeting, even a light one, even nothing, just nothing, not a big performance, just an offhand joke, and it doesn't land, then all of a sudden Juliet isn't funny, women aren't funny, and Juliet is not a serious worker.
Right.
So it's the standards are not the same. Now, I'm also not speaking of every single workplace. Clearly my workplace is not like that. But there was a recent article in Inc., like really recent, I think like from the last month, that now all of a sudden, this study says, no joke, experts say you shouldn't be funny at work. And I'm like, for Pete's sake. And I was actually surprised because there is a sense in which workplaces are chiller since the pandemic and whatnot. But what was interesting is this study that they're referring to actually did talk about the gender differences as well. But then once I read the study, it basically was just like, don't be a doofus. Like that was the takeaway. So, oh well. Anyway, that is the whole thing about being funny. It's just as much, if not more. It's less about always, rat-a-tat-tat delivering perfect jokes or wearing a funny hat. It's just as much about listening and reading the room and all the things you're not saying, all the times you choose not to talk, are equally important, or not to joke are equally important.
But I truly do think reading the room is something that, because I've seen people, I'm like, I'll just like go in there and you just look around and then somebody will say something. You're like, oh, you're going to cringe for them, like, read the room, but
Yeah.
that is something that, yeah, it can make or break you, basically.
Yeah. And it can be like, it can be something simple too. It like, you're right. There's a million pitfalls, right? But then there's also just reading the room where, let's say, and you don't have to be an expert moderator to sense this, but let's say, I was just in an event, it doesn't matter what, but it was where the people were telling different stories. It was during Climate Week, and it was all fine. It was a good event. I have nothing bad to say about it, but just to use as an example, it was a wonderful event. But I'm thinking about how each person's story was very different. Some were happy, some were sad, some were in the middle, some were whatever. And and I was just thinking about how the job of the moderator was to read the room, meaning like, how is the audience reacting now? Is the audience like super sad now? and I'm noticing that the next story is actually pretty funny. So all that person's job is to say is like, well, that story was super sad and it should be, and we all really feel it. And thank you so much. And the next story is going to be not so sad.
Right.
And just to, like, and that's not a joke, but it's reading the room. And it's not even like reading the room when something terrible is happening. It's just being able to say that. And it's so important in so many contexts, because it helps people feel seen. It helps you say the right thing. It helps what you're saying land. And again, it's not always comedy, but it is something that is crucial to comedy and that you learn when you learn comedy.
Yeah, I agree, because I think sometimes if if you try something, like I think a lot of times, like we said in the beginning, how there's, women in their 50s that they're pivoting, they're trying to rewrite their story. And they could be like, hey, I used to be funny. I remember there was a time, but it seems like the time is always like when you're younger or whatever. And then you have all this life experiences and then you're like, I'm not funny anymore. And now you're trying to get back to your
get your groove back.
Your groove, like Stella. God love her.
Mm-hmm.
Love that movie. Yep. But I think that is something that you have to be able to just feel comfortable in your own skin, rewrite your story, and it's your story. Like we
said. I think it kind of goes both ways, or sort of around and around, like like I'm thinking of the image of a pendulum, right? It's like the whole, like, our perception of ourselves is funny and not funny, et cetera, is really like a pendulum-y thing that goes in lots of different directions, because, you have the women who, depending on where and when they were born or raised, like, who were explicitly discouraged from being funny, right?
Right.
Like, please be pretty and quiet. Because you can't be pretty and funny at the same time. You know that, right? It's the law, right? Only one. Of course I kid. And then you have the ones like you who are like, I used to be funny, but then life happened, and P.S. those people are still funny, so don't worry. And then you have, I think you can't ignore, all the ways, and I think less and less so, but you can't ignore all the ways in which, like, middle-aged women get more and more invisible.
Yeah.
And so on the one thing, that depending on who you are and what you bring to this and where your pendulum has been swinging, that might make you feel like, all right, I guess that's how it is. Oh, well, which is understandable. Or it might make you another different, another type of middle-aged woman vibe, which is that, like, I am out of forks to give. And I was funny. I am funny. And I don't care if I am invisible to you. And I don't really care about making myself visible to you, who thinks I'm invisible. But I'd like to make myself visible to some other people who are my people, you know? So, which we talked about. So, that's why at Gold, we do, we of course have a lot of people who are in 20s, 30s, and like really like laser focused on all different kinds of comedy and comedy related careers. But we have a really interesting bunch of women who come to Gold because they're in their 40s, 50s, and beyond. They're established in their careers, whether or not they're entertainment related. One of them is a veterinary surgical oncologist, for example, who now, for whatever reason, pent up energy, empty nest, out of forks, whatever it is that that they are just like, I'm doing this. And they come to us to finally like actually really dig into stand up or sketch, or they come to us because they have a TV show that they want to pitch, that they want to learn, and they don't know anything about the business, and they want to learn how to develop the idea and create a really viable pitch. So like on the one hand, they're like trying it out. On the other hand, they're like, oh no, I'm serious about this.
Right.
And because I have the mental space and I have this surfeit of creative and possibly comic energy that I am ready to unleash on the world. And it is so powerful. And honestly, whether or not the stuff they bring and do is specifically autobiographical, the art that they make is so profound because they're able to bring to it so many decades of life.
Yeah, that right there is the experience of, what you went through, how if you went down to hit bottom and then you came back up. Like everybody has like that, type of story. So it's how you perceive it and how you change it and how you just make it like, okay, this is where I was, this is where I am. That was me, but this is me now. And then you laugh about it. And then you continue to build on that. And I think that is what is helpful with women that are like in their 50s trying to, I do have something to say. And this is why type of thing.
We have one who she's a young grandmother from North Carolina. She's 51. She just brought her first stand-up solo show to New York City. We have a couple of people who, two or three or four people who have created various TV show pitches that are in some stage of development. Like,
That's
and
amazing.
they're doing it now. They did it now. Like, it's not too late, like it's not that whole thing where you have to be, you have to either be 18 or look 18 in Hollywood. It's not that at all. It's not that.
Right. And I think that is how women will be able to be like, hey, you know what? I have to be able to have the confidence and go in a different way, change whatever, because they see other women at your Gold Comedy doing it. They see people out there, and the more women that are working with women type of environment, and you see what's being produced and you see it's funny, will give that person that's still like not sure of herself, sitting in her home like, oh, well, maybe I can try it. So that it gives them, it empowers them to feel like this too could be my next career or my next thing to do.
My next, very serious and fulfilling side hustle. Yeah. Because a lot of them are, some of them are like quitting their jobs, or like Rocky, the woman from North Carolina, is retired, so she is not without constraint. She takes care of her grandchildren, and she has an adult son with special needs. So like, she's not like, I got all this time, what am I going to do with it? But this is now her career.
Yeah.
Whereas other people are figuring it out because they do have a little more flexibility, and they're not quitting their day jobs, but they're adding this in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pretty cool.
That is cool. I mean, this started out as like, my little side hustle too. And it's like, it's like, hey, hopefully side hustles are, they turn into like the main hustle.
Hustles. Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Yes.
Totally.
Well, I cannot, I have enjoyed our conversation. I feel empowered myself, and people, I know women listening to this will feel like, hey, wherever stage you're in, whether it's menopause, young, whatever, just be true to yourself and find the people who will continue to have you be true to yourself and help you be true to yourself.
Yes.
Yes. I can't thank you enough. And I look forward to, seeing what happens more with Gold Comedy. And I'll put that in the notes so that way people can take a look at it. And just continue being you. You're amazing. Absolutely.
Thank you. My pleasure.
One woman to another.
Thank you. It's been a
Thank you.
pleasure.